What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars sits down with a host who doesn't hold back and the conversation spirals into tension nobody saw coming?
Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the Truth Narrator, like this video, and drop your comment below because what happens next will leave you speechless. The studio lights were blinding, casting long shadows across the sleek set of The View. The audience was seated, perfectly still, waiting for the cameras to roll. Behind the scenes, producers whispered nervously. They knew Will Smith was a guest today, a man whose charisma fills a room, whose presence dominates any conversation, but none of them were ready for the storm that was about to hit. Sunny Hostin sat across from him, composed, confident, and calm. Her papers were neatly arranged in front of her, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on him.
The kind of look that said, "I'm in control here." Will walked in, smiling, waving at the audience, the same charm that had won Oscars, fans, and millions of hearts. At first, everything seemed normal. The small talk, the polite introductions, the rehearsed compliments. He laughed politely at a few jokes. The audience clapped. Cameras rolled. It was a standard celebrity interview, or so everyone thought. Then Sunny leaned forward slightly, her voice smooth but sharp. "Will," she began, "you've had a career full of highs and lows, and you've faced criticism that most people couldn't handle. But recently, there's been a lot of talk about your responses to controversy. I want to ask you something direct. Has Hollywood really treated you fairly when you speak your mind?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension ripple through the room. Will's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just enough to hint that this wasn't a question he had expected. He leaned back slightly, taking a breath, keeping his composure. "I've always tried to be myself," he said, calm, measured. "And sometimes that's celebrated, and sometimes, not so much." Sunny didn't smile. She didn't let the moment pass. She leaned closer, her voice firm, unwavering. "Not so much," she pressed. "Are you saying there's been pushback when you've spoken honestly? Criticism that crosses a line?" Will looked at her directly, his eyes steady, but there was a flicker of something deeper, frustration, caution, a hint that this conversation was going somewhere more personal. "Every career has challenges," he said slowly. "But honesty is always a risk. People misunderstand it, they twist it, they use it against you. And yes, sometimes it comes at a cost." A murmur ran through the audience. People leaned forward in their seats. Cameras shifted angles to catch every subtle expression, every micro-reaction. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was a narrative unfolding in real time, a tense interplay between truth, perception, and the weight of fame. Sunny didn't pause. She knew exactly how to push. "And do you feel that cost personally, Will?" she asked. "Have there been moments where speaking your truth changed how people in Hollywood treat you?" Will paused for a beat, letting the words settle in the room. His hands clasped together, his posture tense but composed. Then he spoke, his voice steady but layered with emotion. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, it has." The audience reacted again, soft gasps, whispers, the subtle realization that they were witnessing something rare, a star revealing the vulnerability behind the fame. Sunny's eyes didn't leave him. She leaned even closer. "And yet, you continue to speak," she said. "Even knowing there's a price." Will nodded slowly. "Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be true to myself. I wouldn't respect the people who trust me to be real. And I wouldn't respect my own journey." The tension in the studio was palpable. The polite smiles were gone. The easy conversation was gone. Cameras captured the intensity, the fixed gaze between host and guest, the subtle tightening of Will's jaw, the small, deliberate movements of his hands. The audience could almost feel the weight of every word, every pause, every unspoken thought. Sunny's next question was deliberate, cutting right to the heart of the matter. "And when you say there's a cost, are you talking about criticism, lost opportunities, or fear of being misunderstood?" Will exhaled slowly, his voice calm but heavy. "All of it. And more. Sometimes it's not just about what people say to your face. It's what happens when the cameras are off, when decisions are being made in boardrooms. That's where the cost is real."
The audience shifted again, a mixture of intrigue and tension hanging in the air. Sunny leaned back slightly, her expression calm, almost calculating, as if she were mapping every reaction, every subtle expression.
So when people see your career, she said, they see the glitz, the awards, the fame. But they don't see the pressure. They don't see the choices you have to make just to be honest. Is that fair? Will looked directly at her, a faint furrow in his brow, and said, fair? Life is never fair. Hollywood is no exception.
But that's why moments like this conversation, they matter.
Because honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is worth it.
For a moment, there was a pause. The air felt almost thick, like the studio itself was holding its breath.
The audience was silent. The cameras captured every second. This wasn't just an interview.
This was a collision of integrity, celebrity, and confrontation, a cinematic moment that would be replayed, discussed, and remembered. And just when it seemed like the tension might ease, Sunny leaned forward, her tone sharper, unwavering.
So if honesty has a cost, are you willing to pay it here, right now, on this set?
Will's expression changed slightly. His calm demeanor remained, but you could see the subtle tension in his posture, the tightening of his hands, the flicker in his eyes that told the audience, this isn't just a question.
This is the moment where everything could change. The studio was silent, the cameras rolling, the audience holding their collective breath. This was no longer a celebrity interview.
This was a confrontation.
And the story had only just begun.
The moment Will Smith admitted that honesty carried a cost, the studio fell into a quiet that felt almost unnatural.
The audience, initially clapping politely, now leaned forward, sensing that this wasn't just another celebrity interview.
Sunny Hostin, ever composed, kept her gaze steady, her hands lightly resting on the table.
She didn't rush. She didn't smile.
Every pause she allowed was intentional, a deliberate buildup of tension. Will, she said, her voice measured, you've talked about the price of honesty.
But can you explain what that price looks like for you personally?
Will exhaled slowly, folding his hands in front of him. It's not a single thing, he said, calm yet heavy with emotion.
It's criticism, it's opportunities that slip away, it's relationships tested, sometimes broken. It's the constant awareness that your words will be dissected, interpreted, maybe even twisted.
The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some murmured under their breath, others simply stared at him, captivated.
Cameras zoomed in on every subtle twitch of his expression, tightened jaw, a brief furrow of the brow, the flash of vulnerability in his eyes. This wasn't a man giving a rehearsed answer. This was a man revealing the human cost of fame, of influence, and of honesty. Sunny leaned in slightly.
And yet, you continue to speak your mind publicly, knowing all of this.
Why?
Why expose yourself to that scrutiny? Will's eyes met hers directly. Because silence is worse, he said. If I don't speak, I betray not only myself but the people who believe in me.
There's a responsibility that comes with influence.
And sometimes influence means saying things that make people uncomfortable. A soft murmur ran through the audience. Some nodded subtly, others frowned, trying to reconcile the charm of the man they adored with the weight of what he had just said.
Sunny didn't pause. But isn't discretion sometimes wiser?
Hollywood is known for its unforgiving nature. Some might argue that speaking freely can backfire, damage careers, friendships, or reputations.
Do you believe discretion has a place?
Will leaned back, folding his arms briefly, then uncrossed them with a subtle shake of his head.
Discretion is important, he admitted. But there's a difference between discretion and fear. Discretion protects, fear paralyzes. I've learned the hard way that letting fear dictate your words is a far worse consequence than any criticism you might face. The energy in the room shifted. The polite, almost ceremonial air of the interview had vanished. Now there was a tension, like a taut wire vibrating between the host and the guest. Cameras captured every micro-expression, every subtle shift in posture. The audience's reactions grew more visible, raised eyebrows, leaning forward, whispering to neighbors. Sunny's next question was deliberate, direct, and piercing. You say honesty has a cost. But can we define that cost? Are we talking about public backlash, lost opportunities, personal attacks, or all of it combined? Will's voice dropped slightly, more controlled, almost introspective. It's all of it. Every day, every choice, every word spoken publicly comes with scrutiny. And sometimes it's not the words themselves, it's what they represent. Sometimes honesty gets interpreted as defiance. And in Hollywood, defiance can be expensive. A hush fell over the room. The audience sensed that the conversation was no longer just words, it was a lesson in the hidden realities of celebrity life. Sunny noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, the calm intensity, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes briefly flicked to the cameras before returning to her. And what about fear? Sunny pressed, leaning slightly closer. The fear of being misunderstood, of having your words weaponized? Will met her gaze steadily. Fear is always there, he admitted. But courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is facing it. Every interview, every statement, every public moment, courage is moving forward, knowing there's a cost. That's what honesty demands. The audience leaned in, fully engaged, captivated by the rare vulnerability of a man often seen as larger than life. Cameras captured the slight tightening of his hands, the deliberate way he adjusted in his chair, the faint furrow in his brow. This was no longer a routine celebrity segment, it was a live revelation. Sunny didn't let the tension dissipate. Her voice became sharper, more deliberate. And now, here, on this set, are you prepared to face the consequences of honesty? The scrutiny, the backlash, the headlines that will follow? Will's gaze intensified. I am, he said calmly. Because protecting my integrity is worth more than protecting my image. There comes a point where silence is the greater risk, and I've reached that point. The audience gasped softly, murmurs spreading across the studio. Cameras shifted, capturing the charged atmosphere. Everyone in the room understood they were witnessing something rare, a confrontation between honesty and expectation, between celebrity and accountability. Sunny leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. And if speaking your truth becomes uncomfortable, do you know where you draw the line? Will's voice lowered, deliberate and firm. I'll speak as long as it's truthful. When it's not, I walk away. That's the boundary. That's the line. A collective gasp went through the audience. Cameras caught the tension, the anticipation, the almost electric silence that had descended. And then, in a deliberate motion, Will unclipped his microphone, holding it in his hand for a moment that felt eternal. I came here for a conversation, he said softly but firmly, not to be twisted into headlines. Every eye in the room followed him as he slowly stood. The subtle shuffle of his chair echoed through the studio. The audience sat frozen, realizing they were witnessing a cinematic, unforgettable moment. The polite, promotional interview was gone. In its place was raw emotion, confrontation, and the human cost of honesty. Sunny remained seated, composed but aware. The atmosphere was electric. The cameras captured every angle, every expression. And at that moment, it was clear this story wasn't over. It was only escalating. The studio felt electric, almost unbearably tense, as Will Smith stood there, microphone in hand. Every eye in the audience was glued to him, cameras capturing every detail, the subtle furrow of his brow, the controlled exhale, the faint tightness in his jaw. Sunny Hostin remained seated, calm and poised, but her gaze was sharp, unwavering. This wasn't a promotional segment anymore. This was something raw, human, and unpredictable. You came here for a conversation, Sunny said, her voice steady but edged with challenge. But the moment your words are scrutinized, or headlines are written, will honesty still feel worth it? Will didn't answer immediately. He looked around the studio, the audience, the lights, the cameras, then back at Sunny. Honesty is always worth it, he said slowly, deliberately. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it risks everything. The audience shifted in their seats, leaning forward. A few whispered to their neighbors, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Cameras caught the tension, the energy in the room was palpable, like static before a storm. Sunny noticed the subtle change in Will's posture, his shoulders squared slightly, his hands gripping the microphone a fraction tighter. The room felt suspended in a moment that could explode at any second. Sunny pressed further, her tone precise. You've spoken about cost, consequences, fear, and courage. But what about regret? Have there been moments where speaking your truth made you question if it was worth it? Will's eyes met hers, unwavering. Regret, he said, voice low but firm. I've learned that silence brings far more regret than speaking out. Even if the response isn't what you hoped for, even if it's misunderstood, even if it costs you, regret is the heavier burden. The audience reacted audibly this time. Gasps, soft whispers, people shifting in their seats. Cameras zoomed in on every expression, every subtle movement. The energy in the room had reached a boiling point. This was no longer an interview, it was a confrontation, a human drama unfolding live before their eyes. Sunny leaned forward, her gaze intense. And yet, there's a line, isn't there? A point where honesty risks becoming more dangerous than beneficial. Where does that line exist for you? Will paused, his eyes flicking momentarily to the cameras before returning to her. That line, he said slowly, is when the questions stop being about conversation and start being about control. When honesty is weaponized rather than respected. That's the moment I step away. The audience gasped again. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Whispered reactions spread like wildfire. Is he really going to walk out? This is intense. The cameras captured every subtle reaction, every micro-expression. Sunny leaned back slightly, unflinching. Step away? Do you mean, literally leave? Will's jaw tightened subtly. Yes, he said. Because sometimes walking away is the only way to maintain integrity. For a moment, no one moved. The studio felt frozen. The polite applause and chatter of a typical daytime show were gone, replaced by a charged silence, as if the very air was holding its breath. Then, with deliberate motion, Will unclipped his microphone, letting it dangle in his hand. Every movement was measured, controlled, yet full of unspoken tension. I came here to talk, he said, his voice calm but layered with weight. Not to be forced into sound bites, not to be misrepresented, not to have my words twisted for clicks or headlines. The audience held their collective breath. Cameras tracked him from every angle. Every footstep he took toward the exit felt monumental, every second stretching with suspense. Sunny remained seated, her composure intact, but her eyes didn't leave him for a single instant. I've said what I'm willing to say, Will continued. And I'll say no more until it's in a space where honesty is respected, not exploited. The audience murmured in disbelief, soft gasps filling the studio. The moment was surreal, cinematic, a rare, raw glimpse into the human side of a superstar. The polite, promotional tone of the show had evaporated entirely. In its place was emotion, tension, and the kind of confrontation that would live on in social media and headlines for weeks. Sunny finally spoke, her voice calm but pointed. Walking away doesn't answer the questions. It doesn't clarify anything. Will paused at the doorway, his hand on the handle, and looked back at her, expression steady. Sometimes, he said quietly, walking away is the answer. Then he left. The silence that followed was deafening. The audience sat frozen, some mouths open, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every stunned reaction. Social media notifications began to spike immediately, clips circulating almost instantly, Will Smith standing, unclipping the microphone, and walking away from Sunny Hostin on live television. The studio crew whispered nervously behind the scenes, unsure how to respond. Producers exchanged anxious glances, knowing this footage was gold, but unpredictable. Every moment of that confrontation was cinematic, raw, and unforgettable. The energy in the room lingered long after Will had gone. Sunny remained seated, composed, yet a subtle intensity in her gaze betrayed the impact of the encounter. The story wasn't over. Headlines, social media, and audiences worldwide would dissect every word, every movement, every expression. And one truth was clear: honesty, confrontation, and the human cost of celebrity had just collided spectacularly on live television. The aftermath was inevitable. Conversations online exploded. Was Will justified? Did Sunny push too far? How far should honesty go when the stakes are fame, reputation, and influence?
Clips were shared across platforms, memes were made, discussions ignited, debates raged. The world was watching. The story had gone viral before the cameras even stopped rolling.
And now, viewers at home were left with one question: what would you have done if you were in Will Smith's shoes? Would you have stayed? Would you have walked away?
The answers were as complicated as the emotions that filled the studio that day. The moment Will Smith walked out, the studio seemed to freeze in time. The clatter of chairs, the faint hum of cameras, even the soft whispers from the audience, everything stopped. People sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed, a Hollywood superstar choosing to leave a live interview rather than compromise his truth. Sunny Hostin remained seated, poised and composed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of reflection.
This was a moment that no one in the room would forget.
For several seconds, the air was thick with tension. The audience was silent, mouths slightly open, as if the very act of watching someone walk away carried weight beyond comprehension.
Camera operators quietly adjusted, trying to capture every second of the unfolding drama.
The stage lights reflected off Will's chair where he had been seated moments ago, now eerily empty.
The absence of his presence seemed louder than his words ever could.
Outside the studio, the social media storm had already begun. Clips of Will standing, unclipping his microphone, and walking away were shared within minutes. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, hashtags like #WillSmith, #SunnyHostin, #TheView, and #CelebrityConfrontation began trending worldwide.
Viewers debated endlessly: was he justified in leaving? Had Sunny crossed a line, or was this the kind of honesty the public demanded?
Every post, every comment, every meme amplified the intensity of the event.
News outlets immediately jumped on the story.
Headlines splashed across websites: Will Smith walks out of The View after tense exchange with Sunny Hostin, Hollywood superstar refuses to be misrepresented live on air, and celebrity confrontation goes viral, social media reacts. Analysts broke down every angle of the interaction, dissecting body language, dialogue, and subtle expressions. Television pundits replayed clips repeatedly, debating whether this was a lesson in personal integrity or a publicity spectacle.
Back in the studio, the atmosphere remained charged.
Producers whispered behind the cameras, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the segment continue.
The audience, still in shock, discussed in hushed tones.
Some applauded Sunny's persistence, noting her skill in holding a high-profile guest accountable. Others sympathized with Will, understanding the emotional toll of honesty in the unforgiving spotlight of Hollywood.
Cameras captured every reaction, every subtle nod, every wide-eyed gasp. Fans online dissected every word.
Clips went viral. The moment he said, "Sometimes walking away is the answer," became a meme, a slogan, a rallying cry for anyone who had faced pressure to compromise their integrity. Discussions about the cost of honesty, the weight of celebrity, and the tension between personal truth and public expectation dominated social media feeds. Articles, opinion pieces, and video essays proliferated. The story became more than a single interview, it became a cultural talking point. Sunny Hostin herself became a subject of discussion.
Critics and supporters debated her approach: was she too forceful, or was she asking the questions the public wanted answered?
Her composure, calmness, and skill in navigating the confrontation earned her praise, while the intensity of the exchange ensured that this moment would be referenced for years in media analysis. Meanwhile, the audience at home and in the studio reflected on what they had just witnessed.
It wasn't just about a celebrity interview.
It was about accountability, the human cost of fame, and the courage it takes to speak truthfully. It was a rare glimpse behind the polished veneer of Hollywood, where the stakes of honesty are often invisible to the public. People discussed in forums, chat rooms, and comment sections: how much should a star reveal? How far should a host push? And most importantly, what does it mean to stand by your truth, even when the world watches? The emotional tension lingered even after the cameras stopped rolling. This wasn't a performance to be applauded or criticized, it was a story lived in real time, a collision of personality, principle, and consequence. And for viewers, the takeaway was unmistakable: honesty comes at a price, confrontation can be uncomfortable, and sometimes, walking away is the only way to preserve integrity.
For those watching, the moment demanded reflection. What would you do in a high-pressure situation? Would you speak your truth, regardless of the consequences, or step back to avoid conflict? Would you confront, or walk away? And most importantly, how do we balance accountability with humanity? Now it's your turn. Share your opinion in the comments below. Did Will Smith do the right thing? Did Sunny Hostin push too far, or was this the kind of conversation the public needs? Don't forget to subscribe to the Truth Narrator for more explosive, dramatic, and cinematic stories that put you right in the middle of Hollywood's most intense moments. Because moments like this are unforgettable. The cameras stopped rolling, but the conversation didn't. Social media exploded, the studio buzzed, and the story of this confrontation spread like wildfire. And for those who witnessed it, it was a reminder that sometimes, honesty isn't easy, but it's always worth it.